have this shitty phone camera, but I guess it's better than nothing. I stopped here because I like these places and there were some little fishies in the water. And I was just standing here for like 3 to 4 minutes before I noticed these doves up on the branch there. I don't know if they're visible on the screen. But about how the brain works and about reality, there have been really freaking cool clouds, by the way, like massive cumulus clouds in the blue sky. Anyway, so about how mind, so-called mind or brain, works. So large part of a sense of conflict or a sense of something being wrong, and also a large part of the conflict apparently in the apparent world has to do with mental judgment and mental energetic, like subjective reactivity. So if somebody is seemingly angry at you, that's already an interpretation and you don't know the reasons behind the anger. Usually it's like a frozen, kind of like a traumatic effect, traumatic things that have apparently happened, and then they have frozen and become a mask, a self, a me mask, or a me bot or something. So it's like traumas, kind of, and or like not only traumas, but like crystallized memory identities that have formed apparently in apparent time. They are walking around and acting. And if there would be stopping, there would be an understanding that there's nobody actually doing that. It's all mechanistic, automatic, without self. And it's based on all the personality modes are based on misunderstandings and a certain kind of a blindness. So large part of the conflicts though have to do with the reactivity to what is perceived in the immediate environment. That's basically the main point that I thought about saying or pointing out. So it's like reacting to whatever is perceived as negative and unwanted. So responding to that in a similar manner, and that is kind of a never-ending echo if the other, the apparent so-called other, also reacts back from an egoic point of view or person point of view in a similar manner. That system is like a loop, or not even like a loop, it's more like kind of like, this is just a metaphor, it's not reality, but it's kind of like two surfaces, like two mirrors put together, and that creates a never-ending reflection, although mirrors don't create never-ending reflections due to diffraction and opacity of the surface. But anyway, so the reflection gets darker and darker the more the light gets bounced off a surface. Like yeah, I mean that should make sense. I don't know how to explain it any better right now. So if light hits, let's say there are two mirrors, light hits one mirror, then the second mirror, then back to the first, and then the second and the first and the second, and then when it keeps hitting the mirror, every time it hits the mirror, it loses some of its brilliance or brightness and information. And you could actually go a little bit further or deeper with this, but I don't know how right now, how to express it. Like how do dreams, which are traumas, if you think about the, for example, the German word for dream, it's Traum. traum. So trauma, traum, so dream. So the deeper, more reflected, more distorted the dream, the darker it appears, the dream of life, which is actually the dream of trauma. And ultimately, also trauma is not anything real. It's because it's not based. It seems to hang on. Trauma seem to hang on to the one that suffers from them, and that one seems to be an identity. It requires a certain time-based identity for seeming trauma to seemingly be kept up or keep itself up. But if that central self doesn't exist, that which would have that history and that would be which would be the sufferer, then there actually cannot be any trauma. And in that sense also there cannot be any karma. Karma is also personal, individual, meaning like the wanted and unwanted consequences of actions for someone. But if there is no actor, if there actually is no separate actor, if that's a total illusion based on mentations and energy movements, apparent energy movements, then there can be no karma either. No trauma, no karma, nothing. Because it's based on basically an illusion, imagination that nobody is doing. So in that sense, nothing exists, because exists means to stand out, and for something to stand out, it needs someone that apprehends, someone separate that apprehends the existence of something. But if the apprehender is illusory, then there's just all, but not everything. Not all the things. There are no things, aka thinks. None of that exists. But there seems to be all, which is life prior to the concept of life, which is also this death prior to the concept of death. And this cannot be understood. This cannot be grasped by the mind, so-called thinking mind that tries to understand, tries to come to conclusions, tries to come to a place of safety, maybe mentally, and in mental images. It's all imagination, and the thinker doesn't exist. Am I speaking to these birds? I don't think they're listening. Maybe they're vibing, just I don't know. But that's already imagination, assigning like subjectivity to other objects. Maybe that's the case, but that's also at the same time cannot be verified, because that is a mental concept based on apparent comprehension that is based on memory, and memory that is based on learning, having heard. So it's sound has created thought. And what is thought? Thought is nothing. But thought is kind of based on sound and light, like mental light, the mental images. But the images are embedded with meaning. But can there be meaning that is not dependent on thoughts, like thinking, the apparent thinking activity that nobody does? Can there be meaning without that? Maybe, but it's not the meaning that is conventionally usually understood as meaning, because that conventional understanding of meaning has to do with only conceptual understanding. But there can be kind of meaning, but it's like living and felt, but it's not for some separate feeling. I mean, it's not for some separate feeler. That's what I meant to say. But who knows, because any answer would be just another concept, another mental formation, apparent mental, empty mental formation, aka thought, or mental image, mental video, with added meaning to it. Oh yeah, I meant to say this too. Then the brain, so-called, this is also a metaphor, but the brain seems to construct a comprehensive reality, which is not actually reality, or a comprehensive view of the world by labeling all the time what it sees, what the perception system sees and understands. There's like if some person seems to, like some other body seems to look a particular way, or has a certain kind of an expression or an overall look, that expression becomes that person for, let's say for you, like you think, okay, yeah, that person is like that because she looks like that right now, but it doesn't say to itself, or you don't say to yourself that it's only a passing expression appearing to happen right now, and that's not the person. But the brain seems to kind of work like that. The conditioning seems to work like that. It's biased, and it forms, it makes people, it makes characters out of what it sees and what it has learned, and then it applies, like stamps the past learning, like kind of unconsciously or subconsciously, onto these perceptions, and they get embedded in memory. Apparently none of this is actually real, and it's just a memory, and memory is empty, and memory doesn't belong to anyone. Memory is just also like a fleeting present, not even an appearance, because there are no separate appearances, but there's a seeming appearancing, you could say, like kind of like this stream here with the waves and everything, and it might have some whirlpools and some areas with more pressure, some areas with less pressure, some areas with warmer water, some areas that are cooler in the shade, in the sun. So that's kind of, and it's one, like kind of like a flowing without any separate parts. So that's how life kind of is also. And who is this being explained to? No one, and no one is doing it either. But this is just what is appearing to be happening. Those birds are still sitting there. Maybe it's for those birds, but only in a dream of life. Some dude talking to doves on a branch. It's a dream. Everything is a dream. It's not different from a night dream, but it's not a night dream either. And ultimately, even this, the idea of a dream is a mere idea. It's a pointer, but the pointer is empty. There's no one to be pointed this out for, and there's nothing to point out, and there's no one doing the pointing. So in that sense, it's just another word conception based on an empty understanding and meaning and memory, which is without any kind of a base, which is without any kind of a foundation. Like Nisargadatta Maharaj said, you are like a son or a daughter of a barren woman, and the world and the mind, so-called mind or consciousness, is like a son of a barren woman or a child of a barren woman. Means basically that it seems to exist as a son or as a child. It seems to exist, but the child cannot be existing because the woman that it seems to, the mother that it seems to belong to, cannot have children. She's barren, basically. Anyway, I guess I'll end it there. That's it.